It is June 13th, 2023, and I wanted to start off this episode by doing my best to try and talk about something that recently happened here that's specific to Pittsburgh, to the Pittsburgh area, and something that has only recently happened to me and someone who I've only recently known. There's so many different ways that I want to talk about this, but I really don't know how to talk about this. I'm dragging this out as long as I can because I I want to give all my respect as much as I can and understand that just there's certain moments in your life and in your career, my very young career, where there's things that affect you, and this is one of them. On June 12th, 2023, um, Stan Savran passed away. And it for people who do not know, like I did not know before coming here to Pittsburgh, there's a group of broadcasters and media personalities, people in the media from Pittsburgh, in the Pittsburgh area, that are on the Mount Rushmore. Now, obviously, like I said before, I'm from Connecticut. I did not know anything about Pittsburgh broadcasters or anything. I obviously didn't listen. But after living in Pittsburgh for almost 3 years, 3 years, I came to understand what it's like to work here in the media, but also to know people here in the media. Stan Savran, I was his producer for his noon to 2 p.m. weekly talk show, Monday through Fridays. And I would spend hours with him every day. And before and after the show, we would communicate. And I think one of the best things that you can say about a person who you do not know, I wasn't I wouldn't say starstruck when I first met him, but it was emotional for me to meet him because there was a time when I was not working in the radio industry, not working in the media industry. I was working in retail, as fun as that sounds. And I was looking to try and get a job in radio, and I saw uh started looking up radio stations in Pittsburgh to see if I could reach out to see if I could maybe work for one of these places. And ESPN 970 was hiring, and I sent Stan a message. I saw his email address on the website. Sent him an address saying, "Hey, my name is Zachary Moore. I'm a recent college graduate. If you need a new producer or you need somebody to do social media for you, I'd be willing. Um, he never sent a response back, but that was almost a full year, about 6, 8 months before I would eventually work there with him. And I never told him that story just because I didn't feel like there was an appropriate time. You didn't need to know that. It was when I got hired there, like I said earlier, it was emotional because it was this full circle moment. And then over the course of time, I got to know him as a coworker. I didn't spend any time with him outside of work, but I sure thought about him outside of work because he had a lot of health issues. And I just want to spend a couple of minutes trying to pay respects for the man who I knew differently than some people. His family knows him differently than I know him. His friends know him differently than I do. But during that stretch of time for almost a year, I knew him as the person who I see at 11 a.m. Monday through Friday. Come in and sit down and we go over the show together, what he wants to do. And he was very nice, very calm, and always said thank you. And if I messed up or if technology wasn't working, the only thing he would ask is, hey, is it working now? Which when you're 3 minutes before a show starts and technology's not working, you're running around studio to studio trying to get things working. And he's walking around and he says, hey, is everything all right? In those moments, just something as simple as that, not yelling or screaming or trying to throw blame around, oh, well, this is your fault. He would never do that. It's very nice. And there's so many good qualities that I saw about him working with him that I saw as a coworker. I would say one of the more common things was his battle with his health. We would do a show and he would immediately leave to go to a health appointment, and it didn't matter what it was, he wouldn't want to take a day off. Whether he had worked a Steelers game and then he had to come in and do the show the next day, he would fight my boss to do that show. He would say, no, I'm going to do this. I need to, but my boss would say, no, I'm saying you cannot come into work. And that's what it took to get him to stop working. And um, sitting in meetings with him, and he's talking about, I have this health appointment I need to get to, so I can't record a podcast or something like that. Just puts things into perspective for myself, somebody who has only really had one incident with my health, with my thyroid. I have Hashimoto's, but I just can't imagine him doing that job, doing radio, which is something that he loved, talking about the Steelers, the Penguins, the Pirates, and then to have all these other issues outside of work. And he never made an excuse. He never, never, never complained. He never made up an excuse of why the show was any worse, and it wasn't. It never decreased in quality. He never showed up late or started to show up late and say, it's because I didn't sleep well last night because I had this or that or that. There was none of that. Came to work today every day and he busted his ass. And it was a treat for me to spend even such a small amount of time. And it was my first job in radio, and I could not have been with a more professional, more gracious man than Stan Savran, and taught me a lot of things about how to interact with people and how to treat a talent, especially somebody who every single time we would do shows, somebody would call in and they would say, "Hey man, I don't want to go on air. I just want to tell you, I've been listening to Stan since the 80s with this show that he did, with that show that he did. I'm such a huge fan. I'm calling from Los Angeles, California. Just let him know that I appreciate him and I love him." Every single day that would happen. And over the course of time, I really started to realize how special he was to the city. And then I just feel that much more grateful that I got the chance to work with him, because there's very few people that you'll meet, especially in the industry that is entertainment, that are gracious, that ask you how you're doing when you're really stressed out, and then the show's over and you got all the stuff that you have to do. He would never raise his voice. He would never get mad if we had to record a commercial after the fact. It was very calm, very polite, and he was just the greatest coworker I could ever ask to work with, because he reminded me of some people in my life, particularly with the medical things. And so it just hurts that I haven't been able to speak to him. And I just think about the last time that we worked together, that last day. There was we are just talking about the Pirates. Are the Pirates going to be good? Who knows? And in the pre-show meetings during that time, you're talking about the Steelers, saying, can the Steelers do X or Y? Talking about the NBA in our pre-show meeting. Who do you like? It's a great man, and I can't even begin to express my opinion of him when in comparison to others who have worked with this man for 20 times as long as I did. I can't do justice to heap as much praise as I can, but I do hope that me speaking on it shines some light on it to some people who may not know him. There are a lot of things that you encounter when you're young in your career. You'll encounter a bad boss. You'll encounter a toxic workplace. You'll encounter not getting paid enough. You'll encounter not making any friends at your job because everybody's either way older than you or everybody's all over the place and you never interact with them. And to come to a city and to be able to work with somebody like that, somebody who was a megastar that I didn't even know. I had no idea before coming to Pittsburgh what Stan Savran meant to Pittsburgh, to Western Pennsylvania, to Cleveland, Ohio. And I could never do due diligence in heaping praise on him. I'm not qualified to talk about him, but I feel it's important to discuss this what happened. And since yesterday, I thought about the conversations that we had. The I wouldn't call them arguments, but we would debate things. He wasn't a big fan of the Browns, and I was. And I would say, hey, I think the Browns could actually win the division this year. And then we would go back and forth. And no, 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 this or that. And it was fun. It was enjoyable. And he was somebody who, over the course of that time, I really started to look up to. Because while he was in pain and he was hurting, and he could make every single excuse to not come into work, when he was being asked not to come into work and he fought and he refused to do so. I've never seen anything like that. I've never seen somebody as famous and as powerful and as rich and as well liked and as revered as Stan Savran. And on just on a day-to-day basis, you can see why. He was good at his job and he worked his ass off. But like I said, I only knew him as a coworker. I do wish that I could have met him earlier and really understood what he was as a man. What his thoughts are about different subjects. Fortunately, I was unable to have that, and I am unable to have that with him. But to be with somebody like that for so long, in my mind, spent almost a year with him, and never had a coworker that worked as hard as him. Never had a coworker that was as understanding or as nice. He was a great man, a great guy, and that's how I know him. I don't know him for the sports beat days back in the 80s or his interviews with Steelers players and Steelers legends or his coverage on AT&T Sports. I don't know any of that stuff. I know going into the studio at 11 a.m. talking about, hey, all right, what's up first at 12? What do you need me to get for you? What sound? And so we'd be in the office and I'd be sitting there and people would come up. There was actually a funny thing. We had Kurt Angle, the former pro wrestler, was at the studios and he had been recording some commercials. I didn't see him come in. I only saw him left. But as he left, he walked by and I see him and I see the neck. The neck is what I saw first. I see it and I say, huh, is that Kurt Angle? Turns out it was. And he walks out. And I was all standing. I was like, hey, I think that was just Kurt Angle. And then Sam was like, oh man, I missed him. And then he just goes on a 5-minute story about covering him and just had the nicest things to say. about this guy, and there's many times where uh, NFL players or whoever would come onto the show. And there was one time when we were doing a remote broadcast, and Stan was doing his show from the Steelers facility. And this is when Franco Harris's number was retired by the Steelers. And Stan was sitting there. And then Franco, his number is retired, speaks at the podium, and then he comes off. And I'm listening to Stan, and he's on the air, and he's saying, I'll try and get him over here. And he calls him over. Franco comes over. And I mean, when I was in Connecticut, I knew who Franco Harris was. That's somebody that I knew from a kid in a small town in Connecticut. And he comes on with Stan, and immediately he starts heaping praise on Stan. And he's saying, they say us players are good at our jobs, but nobody ever talks about the media. You people who help keep our game elevated, who bring fans to our game, and you, Stan, are one of the best in the business. You've always been fair. You've always been nice to me. And he goes on and he gives a 5-minute speech about the importance and significance of Stan Savran. And I'm sitting in a cold studio listening to this. And I'm saying, how does this guy know anything about this guy? I work with this guy, and this guy's a Hall of Fame running back, one of the greatest Steelers players in the history of the universe. And he knows the guy who I work with, the guy who I spend 3 hours with a day. How does he know him? And wait, he respects him? I didn't. I can see why he does, but I didn't know that their paths had crossed. I didn't know that Stan had that much of an impact on this region. And I don't think I'll ever know because I wasn't here during the 80s, 90s. I didn't watch every broadcast that he did. I could only speak to that about a year of hearing him on his show. And I say that all to hopefully provide an inch of a praise for Stan Savran. I hope that if you do not know who he is, you look into him, you search his name up, and you just see the outpour of love that this region has put into this man who I knew for a very short amount of time, but he had a significant impact on my life. A man who I told my parents about. I would text him and I would tell him just, hey, this guy's a massive fan. We would be in a restaurant in the Strip District here in Pittsburgh. And we're sitting down, we're having pizza. And on the TV, they're doing a story about Pittsburgh Penguins. And I'm just looking at it and I'm watching it. And then Stan shows up. And I yell to my parents, I say, look, 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 that's Stan, that's Stan. That's the guy I produce for. And my parents are like, oh man, that's so cool. It was. But Stan was more so than just, oh, look who I work with. He was somebody who I wanted to be like, who I wanted to emulate because he had the respect of every single person that's in the building. And every time I would go into work 3 times a week, somebody would say, "Hey, man, you do not know. You're working with a legend here, man. You're working with a legend here. This guy's one of the greatest broadcasters in Pittsburgh and in history." And I didn't appreciate it at that time as much as I do now. And I hope that my words and me speaking on this can shine some light on a man who was nothing short of a legend, nothing short of a pure, true professional, somebody who fought, fought to do what he loved, even if that came with him having some negative health as a response. I hope that me giving a little bit of time dedicated to this man has somehow provided any value to the conversation surrounding this man. And I just wanted to speak on it because I had my own perspective on who this man was, because I knew him in a certain context. I didn't know him as a brother, a sister, an uncle, and a father. I didn't know him as a friend. I only knew him as a coworker. And over that course of time, I grew to respect him because of his character, his work ethic, his professionalism, his desire to get the story right and to not just what's the hot topic. Let's just do that. No, it was every day would come in with something different to talk about. And there were so many times where I messed up and he'd say he was okay. And as a young producer who was so nervous and so afraid of messing up and losing this job that I had spent so long trying to get, 4 years in college, and then coming out of school. I didn't get a radio job coming right out of school, no. But this was the first one, and I could not have had it with a better person. He set the bar very high, and I don't know if anybody will ever be able to reach that. Once again, because of who he was as a person. His sports stakes are irrelevant to me. How he treated me on a day-to-day basis when he wasn't feeling good, when he was tired, when he was upset, when he had shit going on in his life. He never snapped at me. He never made a single comment that could in any way be interpreted as negative towards me. And I appreciate that because I don't know many people who in his circumstance would keep that composure and stay that focused. So I say all that to say thank you to Stan Savran, rest in peace, and I hope that what I've talked about has helped to shine some light on a man who I knew as a coworker, but who many knew as a legend. Rest in peace to Stan Savran.